first of all, how did you come to lease the EV1, and what inspired you to do this?
Um, I was sitting in my living room shortly after George Bush was elected, watching him and his administration, methodically dismantle the Endangered Species Act, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, all of the environmental legislation we had since the 70s, and feeling very powerless, very frustrated. And I sort of glanced out into my driveway and noticed my SUV sitting there. And I thought, maybe it's best that I get my own house in order before I start casting stones. And I had seen these, electric cars fly by me on the freeway, and they would look kind of cool, sort of George Jetson-y. And so I thought, you know what, it's time to do that. I had just had my first child. I had my daughter, one of my daughters, and I thought it's time to go do something. And so I got rid of the SUV and started down the long, arduous path of getting an electric car, which took me about a year of badgering and begging and cajoling and pushing everybody I knew to try and get one, and I finally did, and just fell in love with it.
What did you love about it? What was it like driving it? What did you like most?
Not only was the car spectacular, because you sat in this thing, it was silent, absolutely silent. You pushed the pedal down, and it took off like a rocket ship, because there's no gears. An electric motor doesn't have gears. And so it was a smooth sort of acceleration up to 70 miles an hour in a heartbeat. Or listen, you can go as fast as felt you wanted to. It was a rocket ship. So there was power. It was sleek. It was comfortable. And you realized you were traveling at these speeds and in these ways without emitting any smog whatsoever. And so it was not only the experience of the car, it was also the symbolism of it. It was a moment in time where the largest car manufacturer in the world, the largest corporation in the world at the time was GM, was willing to put this out and maybe promote it. And the implications of that, the effect that maybe could have on the world and on what the troubles we're feeling so acutely right now, was so hopeful and so possible at that moment. It was tangible. It was in your hands. It was hands on this wheel of opportunity. And so I fell in love with that, too. And so to see it, GM slowly squeeze the life out of it to the point where they'd come and pick it up in a flatbed truck and take it away and crush it was heartbreaking, not only because the car was so beautiful, but just because of the potential of what that could have meant for all of us.
Watching the film, I'm like, oh, okay, it's about cars, but it was actually very emotional.
Yeah. It's because it's about so much more than cars. It's about an idea, and it's about mankind making a good choice. For so many reasons, a good choice, and then to see that hope fade and be stamped out is just a really sad, emotional story.
And as an actor now, obviously as a well-established director, I would imagine it would have to be a cause that would be dear to your heart for you to participate and put your face
Sure.
out and be a part of, and kind of go after this. But were there any drawbacks in the car? Was plugging in a hassle ever or anything like that?
The only thing that car couldn't do that any other car could do is go on a really long trip. You couldn't take it to, Vegas if you were so inclined. You couldn't take it across country. You really had a range of 100 to 120 miles. But that's not what it was designed for. It was designed for a commuter car. It was designed to do, and the truth is, the average person drives 20 to 30 miles a day. So you had more than you needed in terms of range. So that was the only drawback. It was the only drawback, is it wasn't for long distances. And people would cite that a lot. They'd say, well, gosh, what if I want to get in my car and drive to Seattle? Well, how many times do you do that And frankly, if that's what you really need to do, if that's the one time in 5 years you just got to drive to Seattle, then rent a car. Believe me, with gas prices the way they are today, you're going to save a lot more money doing it that way than if you buy an SUV and fill it up every time you need to.
Exactly. What do you drive now?
A Prius. Hybrids are the best alternative we have on the market right now. They're a good alternative. They're great cars, but they're not as good as we could be doing technologically right now, and the electric car proved that.
Great. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
For coming to us.
My pleasure.
Very nice to
Thank
meet
you.
you.
You too.
Okay. Okay. Ready? Okay. First of all, give me a quick snapshot of what the film is about.
Dean, take it away.
In 1990, California passed a law called the Zero Emission Mandate, which said if you wanted to sell cars in California, a certain percentage of them would have to be zero emissions. This law forced automakers to create the electric car. And the irony is, they created a car that was so good that it actually threatened the status quo, which created a lot of people who were very nervous about this car existing and did not want it to be around. That's why there's many suspects, and that's why our film is a whodunit.
Because in the status quo, it threatened with the fact that basically the car needs no repairs. It's just, there's no internal combustion engine, so there's no carburetor, there's no transmission, there's no tune-ups. So there's a big part of the auto industry, for example, that depends on these kinds of things to make money. And then, of course, it doesn't use any oil. So you can think it might, who might be against that idea? And I think that's why those of us who got to drive these cars, and after we got over being so addicted to how fast they were and how quiet they were and all this stuff, we began to really get attached to a lot of the ideas that it represented for the future. And that's when we decided to make the movie, because when they destroyed the cars, it was like, this is just too much.
Who killed the electric car?
That takes 90 minutes and a big movie to say it accurately. But the truth is, there were a lot of killers, because this thing threatened many different industries. It threatened politicians. It was a scary thought to the status quo. But to the rest of us, this was not about a car. This was about hope of the future. This was an example of how we could, with the government supporting it, with business supporting it, and with consumers demanding it, we could actually have a clean energy future. And when they crushed this car, it was enormously depressing to those of us who thought we had just arrived at the dawn of a new age.
And that's why we didn't want to make a movie that just said the oil companies are the ultimate villains in the world, or car companies are all bad. We wanted to make a movie that really looked at a complicated issue and included us all. And because we're all part of the solution, that's the only way we're out of this thing. And the fact is that many, many different forces worked against the electric car. Even the fact that everybody was in love with the SUV made it difficult for the electric car to get traction at first. Now, I would argue that the real thing that happened was that the car companies didn't want you to know about the electric car. Probably a much bigger factor, but the movie takes it all on.
What were the challenges that you guys faced in making this film?
Well, I think having lived through the experience, we had a lot of knowledge about the story. But I think the most challenging aspect is the more research we did, the more interviews we did, the more the story kept expanding. And every time we thought we knew the whole picture, a whole new part of it would show up. And so it wasn't like, normally when I make a movie, we have a script and we shoot it. This script kept rewriting itself with every interview that was done.
Wow, I can only imagine. What are a few myths you guys can clarify about the electric car that are out there?
Well, I was on a New York television show last week, and we're talking about the movie. It's one of those very short clips. And while I was talking, they had one of those graphics come along the bottom that said, electric cars take 8 hours to charge. This is not true. You can get most of your charge from an electric car in an hour or 2 hours. And what people don't realize, and I think that many people don't want you to realize, is that it's very simple to charge your car at home while you're sleeping, so that every morning when you wake up, your car is fully charged. It's like having a full tank of gasoline. And the beauty is that gasoline, which is really electricity, of course, is about the equivalent of $1 a gallon. So it's cheaper.
And that's assuming you're not using solar panels where it would be free.
That's even better. Now, you guys actually involved pretty big actors in this. How did you get Tom Hanks and Mel Gibson, and how did that come about, and what was their reaction to the electric car?
One of the things that's important to understand is we weren't trying to just populate the movie with television and movie stars. The true story of the electric car was it was incredibly difficult to get one. And at some point, they didn't want to give it to anyone. And you had to be a celebrity to get a car. So if we wanted to interview people who had these electric cars, we were going to have to interview some celebrities.
And the nice thing about the story as a filmmaker is that it's very, as you know, very difficult to get to a celebrity. But almost everyone, without question, who drove an electric car wanted to talk about it. And that's why we got Mel Gibson and all the Phyllis Diller and all these people just had great experiences with electric cars. So kind of made it easier.
Yes. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what was put into the EV1. There was a lot of money, there was a lot of manpower, and as you touched on, a lot of just hopes for the future and so forth. And then that was all taken away. It was kind of crushed. Talk to me a little bit about that and the impact that it had overall.
Well, I think that the thing is, aside from the car itself, there was a lot of innovations, like regenerative braking. A lot of things came out of this car that were great advances. And if it had been embraced in the same way that, say, Toyota had embraced the hybrid car, where every year they made it better and better and better, if the electric car had been made better and better and better every year, we'd be looking at a phenomenal vehicle 10 years later. So most of what we're talking about now is a 10-year-old car. There are smaller companies that are making new electric cars, and these electric cars are going 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds. They're getting over 300 miles to the charge. So if this was really embraced by the auto industry, we think that it could be an amazing vehicle available for people today, where there's no sacrifices at all to the normal consumer.
But it takes laws to push big industry to do things. And we hope that every state in the union puts laws on the books forcing car makers to make alternatives to gas cars, because that's what put these on the road in the first place.
That's right.
And the reality is it's expensive to have a new technology on the road. So when every car maker knows that every other car maker has to have one on the road, suddenly you're getting a lot of innovation, a lot of things on the road. And I think that was one of my big lessons, is that government isn't always bad. There's good places for it.
Is the government and the automotive companies, are they doing anything to help, with this gas battle that everything is going, or are they doing anything to improve this right now?
They're not doing enough. I think that the efforts of supporting ethanol is interesting and could possibly be good for us, but I think we're wasting a lot of money on hydrogen when there's a technology that exists today that could be on the road tomorrow if the government simply said you have to do it. And by ignoring that, what they're doing is they're saying, look at this shiny object over here, don't look at what's right in front of you. And this is the technique that automotive industry has used for years and years to distract the consumer. And we're hoping that this distraction ends and that the consumer demands, we want electric vehicles and we want them now.
That's why we made the movie, really, just to get the story out so people can say, hey, wait, I want this. And until now, there's really been no story that people can go, okay, I get it. So.
Yeah, very good. Thank you very much
Thanks
for
for
talking
being here
to
with
us. No, of course. Thank you for the questions that I have for each one of you, so I'll just direct them with your names as I go.
Anytime you're ready.
Okay. Okay. First of all, Chelsea, describe the EV1 and why this was the ideal car.
Well, the EV1 started out to be the best engineered electric car by General Motors. What they didn't count on was it being the best small car they've ever made. And it was quiet, and it was fast, and it didn't pollute, and it was very easy to wrap your heart around and become passionate about. And the drivers loved them.
And Wally, how did you first become involved in this project? You were kind of one of the brains behind all of this.
Well, I've been involved with electric cars since 1965 when I was a sophomore at Caltech, and it started growing from there. I was asked to come on board as a consultant to AeroVironment, and AeroVironment in turn did the project. We also at AeroVironment wrote the proposal that initiated the EV1 project, the impact which grew into the EV1.
Also, this question is for Wally. Do you feel the government is doing enough to find alternative energy solutions? Not only the government, but also automotive companies.
I think in some cases, in most of the cases, they have an interest to not find an alternative, to even pose things that are alternatives which are not. I think that the present administration and the present mindset of the car companies is to maintain the status quo, not to develop new technology.
Now, Chelsea, in 2001 there were layoffs, right? And then 2002 was when they took all the cars back. What kind of an impact did this cause, and why was this so near and dear to you personally?
Well, I mean, the impact that it caused was huge, because in the end, the whole country ended up being denied what was such a viable choice in terms of air quality, but also our dependence from oil and global warming and sort of everything that it represents. It was near and dear to me because I had, helped put these cars on the road, and then they were not only taking them back, but insisting on crushing them. I mean, it was such a cannibalistic act toward its own product.
Yeah, I couldn't believe brand new cars just like coming out like dust.
Pancakes.
I was like, yeah, let me have one.
You and me both.
Can we expect to see them again? I would like both of you to answer this.
Absolutely. There still is a huge demand for electric cars, and we're still facing the same problems we were 10 years ago. And hybrids have helped sort of pave the way toward that a little bit. The next step will become plug-in hybrids, which marries the best of electric cars with the best of hybrids, creating a car that has 20, 40 miles of electric range to get you through your commute, and also a hybrid backup gas tank, so that when you want to go further, you can, and you have that sort of flexibility. And ultimately, we will have electric cars again too, and there are some smaller automakers that are making their way into that world right now, and are going to try to go up against the Goliath auto industry, because they too believe in it just as much.
Yeah, and I'll answer that question. Basically, I agree with everything Chelsea said. I think that the plug-in hybrid has the capability of becoming the mainstream product. It's a car that does not have the range limitation of the pure electric. And the plug-in hybrid really was not an option the way it is now. It wasn't an option 5 or 10 years ago. The improvements in battery technology really enable this. I think out of the plug-in hybrid, we're going to see electrics come back as a niche, but probably a much bigger niche. It's not going to be a few thousand, but probably a few 100,000.
Here we go. Are there, this will be geared more towards you, Wally. What other fuels might we use in our automobiles in the future? Is there anything other than gas that they would try to use?
Well, let me explain. First of all, electric cars use the most available energy sources. The electric utilities get energy from a combination of sources. In some cases, it's now wind, geothermal. 20% of my electric power comes from geothermal. Some of it is natural gas. So we have all of these combinations of energy sources that provide electricity. With the plug-in hybrids, you can put gasoline into it for long distance driving, but I think in a lot of cases that'll be alcohol, ethanol, or some of the other what I call biofuels.
And I know that you slightly touched on it, and now I would like a little bit more in depth and a reaction from both of you. How did you feel when these cars were destroyed?
Nauseated. Yeah, I mean, it was almost surreal when we first saw it. There was no good reason to crush those cars, especially since the vast majority of them were new or relatively new, had only been driven a few thousand miles. And we had a waiting list of 4,000 or 5,000 people who wanted just that one model, not even all the different cars that were made. And the more they were on the road, the more people wanted them, and they became their own best advertisement. So it was hard and kind of easy to understand why GM was crushing the cars if they didn't really want to be in the business. But it's indefensible. There's just no reason to explain it.
Well, Chelsea, guys have emotions too, and especially when you're involved in creating something and you see your creation destroyed. I've told Chris Payne, the director of this film, that it's difficult sometimes. I watch the screenings, every one of them. I really love watching it. But I have emotions. And it's fortunate that the lights are down low, you know, during these screenings, so people don't see that I get emotional.
Are there any closing comments that you guys would like to make about the film and maybe the importance of why people, this is going to air around the world, so this will be, you know, very good for the film,
Yeah.
why people should watch this film?
Well, I think that we have a couple goals in mind with this film, and one of them is absolutely to see the mandate reinstated in California to require electric cars and plug-in hybrids again, and also adopted in every state in the union so that we get enough cars on the road to actually make a difference. You know, some other countries are already more progressive than we are in terms of electric technology, and we'd love to see them, you know, grow that as well. And I think also we as consumers need to have faith in our own ability to make change and to ask for what we want and vote both politically and with our wallet, and start refusing to settle for less, really, until we start, you know, seeing these improvements.
I encourage everyone who has a chance to see the film. The film is a little bit sad, but it's also inspiring. I think by seeing it, you'll be motivated to think and ask some of the right questions.
Great. Thank you very much for talking
Thank
to
you.
us.